This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neiman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Special presentation today. Today is a panel discussion. This is the third in the series of panel discussions. This one is on infilling your mobile home park, bringing in mobile homes, which is obviously key to valuation, key to maximizing the asset, maximizing the communities for our residents, for our investors, for everybody. But it's a pretty messy process. Lots of pros and cons. Got an expert panel today. All these guys have experience doing this, and they all have kind of a side experience as well that I'm sure we'll touch on as well. So I'll let them introduce themselves, but briefly, we've got Andrew Keel, Stephen Blank, and Kolman Bubis. Thanks, guys. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what's your favorite thing about bringing in mobile homes to one of your communities?
Yeah, thanks for having us on. I'm Andrew Keel. We own and operate 33 communities, and we're growing as well. We love infill because of the forced appreciation. You know, the ability to add value. It's a harder way to add value, but you know, it's fairly simple to sell the homes once we get them on the lots and get them ready to go.
Good deal. Stephen, you want to go next?
Yeah, Stephen Blank, the president of Blank Family Communities. We operate 50 communities, around 5,000 units in 10 states. And yeah, like Andrew said, the best part about bringing in homes is adding value to both the community, to the residents, and to the ownership of the communities.
All right, great. Kolman?
Yeah, Kolman Bubis. I'm a predominantly a broker in the space, been brokering mobile home parks since 2004. And, you know, love the business so much. I had to buy a few small communities for myself to kind of really further the education on the space. Love that it's really the last true market rate affordable housing without subsidies. And as far as bringing in homes, these guys really nailed it. You know, the dynamic of bringing in new homes, used homes to upgrade the community, provide much needed, you know, attainable housing, and really drive, you know, cash flow, valuation of the community from, you know, a refinance or sale perspective.
Good points, guys. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, for my end, I like to buy parks with lots of vacancy as well, because as Andrew mentioned, especially, you can really force the appreciation of the park. And it's not by just cutting amenities, and it's not by jacking up the rates. It's by adding more affordable housing. And really, this is the only asset class you could pull that off. And I love it just being on site when this happens, because it's kind of fire drill, as we'll talk about, but, you know, moving cars and directing traffic and not running over the paper boy and all that stuff. But it's cool the first time you bring a home into a community, especially a community that has been basically ignored for 20 years, because it's like people coming out of the woodwork. And so I always like to be there for the first one. It's like, I didn't know there were this many children in this park. I don't know this many adults in this park. Like, it's like everyone's got a pretty boring life watching Cops right now, and then they see this massive trailer come in, and it's like, all right, something cool is going down. And of course, it's loud and big, and, you know, it's kind of just chaos, but it's chaos for the common good, and that's always fun. So that's one of my favorite things about it, bringing them in. What would you guys say? Maybe go in reverse order here and start with Kolman. What do you guys say is the hardest thing about bringing in mobile homes to a community?
Wow, I think of all the things that you do in owning and operating a community, bringing in homes is probably, frankly, the hardest. Right? Collecting rent is pretty simple. Bookkeeping the rent with a decent software, pretty easy. You know, where do you even start? And I think the best place to start is with the huge mistake, and maybe a little story. But the first home that I ever bought for a small park that I own, you know, I didn't really know what size home to get. You know, is it going to fit on the lot? What are the setbacks? And truthfully, the home that I bought was probably too large for the lot. And, you know, luckily it was in a place where the setbacks weren't as stringent as other places. So I really do think it is probably the hardest part about, you know, adding value to a community is figuring out, you know, what home goes on what lot, whether it's new or used, does it fit, does it meet the setback requirements in the local municipality? How do you get it set? Where do you get the home from? I mean, it creates a million questions that if you haven't done it, sometimes you got more guesses than right answers. So it really is an art in itself. And I do think it's the hardest part to scale and to really kind of execute on well.
Good stuff. Steven, you want to go? Go ahead, man.
Yeah. So besides all of the compliance and actually physically getting the home in there, it's, getting the right resident in the right home. So, traditionally this industry has always been about selling houses, and that's what, the earliest mobile homes were more equated to parking lots, right? Where now that is just continued to evolve and evolve. And now with homes, especially getting, more expensive and more people wanting to rent, it's, what do I want to implement? How many houses do I want to sell versus how many houses I want to rent? And for us, with doing this in so many different states, it's keeping up with the municipalities, all the different compliance and the different type of infrastructures in the communities. So it's not all cookie cutter like what Kolman was just talking about. It is, what type of, how are my water sewer hookups going to go? Like how's the electric pedestal and what is the infrastructure getting plugged into? Can this water system handle 20 new homes, using water and sewer? So all of those things, baked into one. And as you said, like just the fire drill of these homes are coming in and dealing with things on the fly as they come up.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors like on the construction side of things, dealing with the different contractors and making that orchestra play nicely all at once. But the hardest part right now, I think, is the inventory, not just used homes, but also new homes. We have an order of 44 homes that is like 8 months out. Like we can't even get the homes from the factories brand new. And usually the new homes are more reliable because you're like, okay, I'm going to order them and then they're going to be here on this day. Well, then a month before you get a call from the sales rep and he's like, hey, sorry, we're going to be another couple of months out. So you're trying to match a pro forma, and it's like you're trying to hit a moving target. So I think that's part of it. And then also used homes have become more desirable right now because of the backlog in the new homes. So I would say inventory is the big thing for us right now.
No, that's definitely more of a recent supply chain issue, but yeah, same thing. I mean, Clayton and True have been really given allocations the last year and a half or two, where it used to be, you just order them, they show up however many days out, we're 40 days out. Okay. Or we're 60 days out. No big deal. I call my sales rep, like, hey, I bought 20 of these from you. I need 5 more. He's like, Ferd, I got guys that buy 100 at a time and I can't get them a home. You're not even in the ballpark of being important enough for me to get you a home. And then I know, so Champion, I talked to a guy who buys 500 a year from Champion. He's just like, I could have 10 homes tomorrow delivered in my park because I buy 500 a year and I have for 20 years. So I just tell them to butt me in front of the line, and they do. And he's like, that's why I don't buy from the other manufacturer, because they make me wait in line like I'm one of you guys, and he kind of said it like that. I was like, so that is another hard part about infill is the unknown. And there are lots of guys, and I've got lots of clients that I see this on, like their pro forma, like your pro forma is blown up because you just budgeted infill of 3 a month, and you're looking at a big 0 for 24 months. So that's going to, especially if you're a sponsor or syndicator, that's going to blow up your splits, it's going to blow up your yield. It could be a big problem. Other problems, and you guys have all mentioned the good ones. Other problems I always had a problem with in one park in particular is parking. Is just bringing the homes in. I didn't have the space to move all the cars. So I'd put notes on everybody's door. Don't park on this section today. And if it's in the back of the park, I got to block off, like, because of the turns, it's a 76 home. I got to block off like 50 parking spaces. I only have 10 extra parking spaces. So of course people don't comply. So at the beginning, I could let people park in the grass on the vacant lots. But every time I brought on a home, there was one less vacant lot. And then it just became a continual fight with everybody. I'm going to tow your car. And then they're like, no, you're not. You're not going to tow 15 cars this morning. I only got 2 tow trucks ready to rock. So it was just communication with the residents and really saying, leave your keys in the car and we'll move them around, quickly. And that was a challenge that I didn't expect. I guess I should have noticed, but I didn't expect how hard it was going to be on game day when I got a guy with a 76-foot home behind him and he's saying, look, I'm going to drop it right here unless you can move all these cars. I'm like, you can't drop it there because then I'll never be able to get it to the back. So that was a surprise. Andrew brought up supply chain. Stephen, you've seen this in lots of states and for lots of your guys' clients. How are they dealing with that? And are you involved in that process with your clients, or is that more on the ownership side as the third party manager? In a lot of instances, are you running point or are you not involved? And are you able to leverage any relationships, if you will, due to the reach of your organization?
Yeah, so that's actually a big point of value that we can bring, because we've been purchasing houses for a number of years, and before my company, my family owned community, so we've had a long-standing relationship with Champion. So currently, as it's slated, we're set to get 300 houses from a single manufacturer this year, but those were ordered 3 to 6 months ago in some cases to ensure that they were going to get here. And as everybody knows, we have no idea if they're actually going to make it in, on the time. But as soon as I outstretch my, reputation, let's say, in, more in the Texas area or in Florida, then I've got no pull anywhere. And then it's being put in line where people are telling me, call me in 23 because we're not going to be able to get you houses. But in the Midwest, where we're centrally focused, we've been able to get houses for everybody. And it was all by bundling them into one organization under Blank Family Communities instead of each person individually trying to get them.
Great stuff. Kolman, you mentioned your first home, and I've had some similar experiences where, you got to shoehorn the home in just right. And as we all know, a 16 by 76 sells a little better than a 16 by 66. So you can put a bigger home in, you generally want to. What do you look at during your due diligence process? From either setbacks and or vacant lots and just kind of order of magnitude of and an order of priority for infill. Are there any tips you can give us on that? I know from the brokerage side, you see tons of deals across your desk. What are you getting questions from smart buyers that are helping influence that process?
Yeah, we're absolutely getting questions from, buyers, small, big, and above, in terms of if there is vacancy, how am I going to fill it? Obviously, 60s vintage communities, much smaller seller sites. And to your point, Bert, certain homes work better in certain markets. So then you add on the layer of complexity of, in different states, there's different set requirements for new homes where, Steven and I are sitting in Illinois, Michigan, and HUD regulated states for bringing in new homes and HUD sets. It becomes a huge additional cost and requirement to comply with that for a new home. Whereas, in Texas or other areas, Tennessee, et cetera, where the frost line is much higher, you don't have the same kind of set regulations. So I think the smart buyers are looking at the size of the sites. They're looking at the in-place utilities. Is all the electrical 50 amp where a modern home is 100 or 200 amp electrical? Are these homes that require natural gas? Are they heated by propane? Are they all electric homes for AC and heat? And then to your point, Bird, I think most smart buyers or operators, you work with what you've got. The community is what it is, but from a maximization standpoint, I always heard and was taught you want to maximize the size of the home that's going on any given site to try to get the most interior square footage for your customers. Those are kind of some basic comments that come to mind in terms of what people are looking at when they're really analyzing their communities or an acquisition or a sale.
Great points. Andrew, do you have anything you want to supplement on that as far as what you guys look at in DD, and also maybe touch on some of the stuff you've done with having transport kind of in-house to kind of mitigate some of this risk? Stephen mentioned in detail the risk, from the manufacturer standpoint, but a bigger problem I've been having this year, I've been doing mostly used homes this year for the same reason of manufacturer delay. The bigger problem I have in used homes is finding reliable guys that have trucks and that have licensure and that can install them properly. So I have a toter truck that came with my park. So I considered just building out my own transport team, and we put a lot of work into underwriting that business and business plan, and then it really didn't want to do it. It was like we may do it out of necessity, And then we found a guy, and he moved 11 houses for us in the last 20 days. They've been sitting there for months, used homes, like, and he's ready to rock. Like, we're like, we'll put us on your calendar, every third Monday, we'll find one, we'll keep you busy. So we found a guy that's willing to do that and can cross 2 or 3 state lines, but it was 100 phone calls to get this guy. And if he gets hit by a bus or a trailer, then, I got to go back to the drawing board, because the guys that I have used in the previous several years, they're not picking up the phone anymore, because one of them told me straight up that one of the top 5 operators, I won't mention them because I'm kind of mad at them, but the top 5 operators said, we're going to pay you $1,000 extra for every move, but you have to give us the next 100 anytime we ask, and they keep asking. So he's like, I'm like, I paid you like $200,000 in the last year, and you're not going to pick up my phone call. He's like, 200,000 is nothing compared to these other guys. So I've learned that from a transport issue. So I know you've solved some of that riddle. So I want to know your opinion on that riddle, as well as piggyback on some of Kolman's comments on DD outlook.
Yeah, definitely. On the mobile home transporter side of things, we realized pretty early on that was one of the major pain points for us, is we were, putting our deal at risk because we were depending upon these third parties to bring homes in. And like you said, you can make 100 phone calls and 99 of them are going to be with somewhat unsophisticated business people that are, chucking a truck that has been toting mobile homes for, 20 years at his own pace. So we decided to get a toter truck. I really lucked into it because I think it's heavily about the driver. I don't consider it a very scalable business. It's not like I would want to go out and buy 20 toter trucks. I think it's very dependent upon who's going to be driving that truck, because you have a lot of liability with this. So you really want to make sure you got the right guy behind the wheel. But one of our on-site managers, her husband, toted huge boats around, like huge yachts around the country. And then after that, he toted around large pieces of concrete out of St. Louis, all across the country. So that was what he did. He already had his CDL and everything. So when we brought him into hauling mobile homes around, it was somewhat natural. So that's kind of how we, went about the business. And then also we had a couple huge infill projects that needed, over 50 homes brought in. And where in the beginning we thought we were going to start toting for third parties and then use them for our projects as needed. Well, it turned in that he only moves for us now, because we've just kept him busy, and we'll just get him licensed in the different states as needed to help us with the installations as well. So it's definitely helped us expedite some of our pro forma timelines that we had for infill. But it is, it is a stressful part of the business, making sure your permits are correct, making sure you can cross state lines, and so forth. But to piggyback on the due diligence side of things, one of the things that Kolman brought up is making sure the utilities are on the vacant lots are ready for a home, like before the home gets there, right? Because when the home gets there, it's much harder to snake a sewer line. It's much harder to, make sure the water valve is not all rusted and falling off once there's a home sitting on top. So we try to spend a lot of time on the vacant lots before there's a home sitting on top of it, to make sure that those things are in order, so that it's a lot easier to change a valve, on a water riser when there's not a home there. Same thing, snake a sewer line from when little kids went by and stuck rocks down them. So that's just one of the things we spend a lot of time on.
Good stuff. So based on this topic here of infill, we probably have a biased panel, but do you guys prefer buying projects that require lots of infill? Obviously, there's more upside that, or do you prefer stabilized but just also do infill? Or do you guys balance a different mix in your portfolio so as to balance the workload and or the risk profile? Stephen, you want to give us your 2 cents on that?
Everybody knows that the market is just going crazy right now. And even it used to be, a few years ago, even, that you could buy a community that was stabilized and then increase the value of that community by just increasing rates. But now everybody knows what rates should be, so that ability is becoming less and less. So the greatest ability that everybody has is to take, the value addition through occupancy. So in the majority of deals that we look at, and especially with help clients with due diligence, it's, look, your return's not what you want it to be right now with the sale price. You're not going to talk down the sale price of this community, because you're going to have 5 other people that are willing to buy this community. but what we can do is, get the return that you want through infilling homes still. And that's really, aside from, increasing the value through adding amenities, cleaning up some glaring, compliance issues or safety issues, it is still the best way to get a good return.
Got it. Coleman, you want to touch on that? And then also, I'm curious your opinion on the current state of the market as to how much people are paying for upside for vacant lots. I know most of us in the industry went to Frank and Dave's boot camp at some point along the line, and he always taught, don't pay for the vacant lots. Vacant lots worth zero. Obviously, the marketplace in the last 2 years doesn't think a vacant lot is worth zero. A vacant lot is potentially worth 50,000, depending on the NOI of a particular lot. And as such, some people will pay 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe even 1,000 per vacant lot for the opportunity to turn it into a 50. So I'm curious on your opinion on that as well, because I know you see a lot of deals, especially on your brokerage side.
Yeah, I'll answer that question first, because in 2007, 8, 9, 10, when the market was kind of crashing and there was no liquidity and there was really less liquidity for actual homes than there was communities, vacant lots were definitely, in some cases a liability, right? You have to cut, they're more expensive. You got to cut the grass on those. You got to do all these other things to keep the community looking nice, and weren't given a lot of value. And to your point, the market today is very different for several reasons, and I'll caveat that with the value of a vacant lot is very much market by market. In the middle of nowhere where there's no jobs and whatnot, a vacant lot might still be worth $0 or $5,000 or $10,000 a lot. If there's vacancy in Austin, Texas, I think you start to look at valuation metrics that are used in a lot of other businesses, like replacement costs. And that really comes down to, land has value. And certainly to Andrew's previous point, right, if the utility infrastructure is in on a site where you've got good water lines, good sewer lines, good electrical lines in, and it's a market where there's demand for housing, you start to look at those not on a capitalized lot rent basis, but in some ways a replacement cost basis, because there is new communities being built now, and it costs dollars to get those utility lines into the ground. So there absolutely is value being attributed to vacant lots, especially in markets where an operator is capitalized to buy new homes, infill with newer used homes. So absolutely value getting attributed there. And it's really more so on top of the capitalized value of the income stream in the form of replacement costs for in-place infrastructure.
Good points. I think you're spot on with that, and I feel like that was more of a mystery or secret 2 and 3 years ago. People have realized the demand for affordable housing has gone up considerably, frankly, because everything else is being more expensive, and COVID really shined a light on the need for affordable housing. One, behooves me to mention a vacant lot is only a valuable vacant lot if you're legally permitted to put a mobile home on it. So look at your zoning, look at your setbacks, look at your permit, because I've seen that in many instances where people are like, "Oh, I'm just gonna bring some homes on here." And I'm like, "You can't do that." And they should have called me before instead of after. And we're looking at a park right now that I don't remember the counts, like 50 some of the lots that are vacant are in floodplain. So depending on the municipality, you may not be able to be ever allowed to put a home on there. Or earlier we were talking about, Coleman, you mentioned HUD sets in states like Illinois. This particular park because of the floodplain, they have flood sets, which I've never actually done one, but I've seen them. But it basically, the water comes in, they want to get the home out of there fast. So the underpinnings have like an emergency release, so you can disconnect them and pull the home out faster and take it away in minutes instead of hours in the event of the flood. So those cost more, right? And that's more complicated. Less of the installers know how to utilize those. So just another, my team here will often ask me, like, what's the answer to this question? And they hate this answer from a lawyer, but it's the most common answer is it depends. So how hard is it to install a home? Well, it depends. How valuable is a lot? It depends, and depends on a lot of factors. That's why it's good to get a group of different perspectives here to hopefully share with our audience lots of those hypotheticals and make the world a smarter place.
Yeah, the devil's definitely in the detail.
Right. So, all right, guys, next topic. What's the most homes you brought into one park in 1 year? I'm just kind of curious how much infill is possible to maybe inspire our audience.
I'll take the lead on that one. We brought in 43 into one park. It was a mixture of new and used, so it was like 50-50. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys have brought in.
Yeah, so last year at Blank Family Communities, we did 35 new homes. But at a previous company that I was overseeing, we did over 400 in one community in 1 year.
Wow.
And
Oh.
yeah, so it was in a really strong, it was off an 8-lane highway in Michigan, extremely strong market, single family home value over 300,000. And we had a sales team they would lease and or sell over 50 houses a month. We'd have 6 houses in the entranceway. And that community has since gone and sold at just a crazy number. And it was the 4th biggest community in the country.
Wow.
So that was probably the most fun project I've ever had in this industry.
I bet. Probably the most stressful too.
Very much.
Yeah. I've got a community here in Kansas City. We brought in about 60 plus or minus. We demoed a couple, brought in about 60, but it was over about a 16-month period. So I kind of start to finish and we did it. So, and that was fast and furious. And that was about 5 used homes and the rest new. And one tactic that I used that I think is helpful here is, I staged them in a strategic order as to which lots to put them on to basically give people the sense of front yard. And then I'd put a different one in front of it. I would turn them different angles. They weren't all parallel. I had different color. I had to make sure, okay, I got a beige one. I'm not going to put a beige one next to it. I'm going to a beige, a gray, a white, a black, different color shutters. I put porch models on the corner. So when you turn the street, you're looking at the big, beautiful porch. I put double wides neighborhood set on other wide lots of corners. So really just try to give it an eclectic feel. And then I would buy 6 different homes from 6 different manufacturers at a time. So like I didn't have cookie cutter. They were, hey, look, go pick one. But then I repeated the same 6 over and over. But it was kind of like different strokes for different folks. I'd do one with carpet, one with no carpet. So that was our most successful project from an infill perspective. But and HUD set, it was in Missouri, which is surprisingly a HUD set state. So that was that's why I spent a lot of money on concrete that year. But,
Yep.
Kolman,
Yeah.
anything you want to add?
No, nowhere close to 400, and that gives me great amounts of anxiety just thinking about that. Because it really is, there's so many moving parts with infilling homes, from laying out the lots to the construction teams, especially in a HUD state, making sure they're doing their job correctly with the concrete, actually getting the home on there, getting it decked, getting it AC'd, making sure you got the utilities right. You can order an all-electric home and then realize you don't have the right amperage for that. So there's just so many factors, as you mentioned, picking out the homes that go into it. So 400 in a year is very, very impressive.
Yeah,
It's a lot. Well, that would remind me on the electric too. That's one thing one tip I give to some people is on, if you understand your utilities, and you can better understand your utilities if you get an Alta survey, even better if you get a Table A survey during your due diligence, because I identified in this park I'm talking about, that the gas lines were going to be a problem for bringing in large homes. I would have to bring in 60 footers, but if I got rid of the gas lines, I could bring in 76 footers. And if I got 0 setback permission from the city, I could bring in 76 feet because my lots were 76 feet 1 inch. So that's what I ended up doing. I got the zoning letter, and then I ripped out the gas lines and just ordered all electric homes. So you can only do that so far north. I got a park in Des Moines, and I had an all electric home and nobody wanted to buy it because they're like, that's going to cost $500 a month to heat that thing up north. But in central Missouri, it's not quite as cold. The electric worked out, and I was able to shoehorn in more bigger homes, which was why we could sell them faster. All right. What did you guys say makes the market perfect for infill, and maybe what makes it not perfect for infill? Kolman touched on some of this for value of a lot. Obviously, employment centers, things like that. But are there any other factors that, make it perfect? We know big lots is one of them somebody's mentioned. Great overall market community. Whoever wants to jump in, go ahead if you've got anything that you've noticed from your experiences. This is a bad place to bring in homes. Don't do it.
Yeah, I would say, making sure your test ad performs really well. If you're going to be bringing in homes, I think a lot of us do like a lease option, type of arrangement where they're going to, they're not coming up with 30,000 cash to buy the homes, especially in the Midwest. But a lot of times you'll have like hey, can you do $3,000 as a down payment? And then in your test ads, making sure that the people that are reaching out are not just, raising their hand saying, hey, I'm interested, but they actually have the $3,000 to put down. Because from experience, people that have $1,000 to put down and people that have $3,000 to put down are a drastically different tenant. And, the 3,000 is a much better community in my eyes.
That's a great point. I got a park right now we're doing infill on, and this is a small town, like 14,000 people, but it's kind of an affluent small town. We did our test ad. We had like 1,000 hits in a week. It blew away everything we've ever had. And there were 0 homes for rent in the whole city, like mobile homes, 0 available, apartments, 0 available, rental homes, single family, 0 available. So the demand was through the roof. We brought the first home in, people followed it to the park. I kid you not. Like, so people showed up. When is that one available? Here was the problem. It's the problem you just mentioned. Hey, I got 1,000. How much you want for that? You want 1,000? You want like 2,000 or 3,000? I'm like, we're gonna want like 20,000. What? For a mobile home? I got 1,000. It's like, all right, all demand is not equal. We had lots of demand, but and then the lot rents were historically low. All in rents for the homes and the lots were in the 400s. So getting somebody to buy a new home, you're talking 400 just for the payment. So that's a used home market for me. So to answer my own question, what makes it a bad market is the same thing Andrew said. You got to make sure that the test has there, but then you got to really sift through the demand, which is kind of hard to do during due diligence, because it's just a Facebook and, hey, I'm interested. You want to come set up a showing? Yeah. Do you really have the money? Or do they come and say, can you work with me on the deposit? Can you work with me on the down payment? Like, no, I mean, you need the money. Sorry, we're not going to let you in. Stephen, what about you and Kolman? What do you guys for what makes a good market or a bad market?
Yeah, so the metrics that a lot of operators use is how close what the single family home value is, because obviously there's the 2 models in manufactured housing are the affordability model and the lifestyle model. So especially in the Midwest, we're all about the affordability model. What is the cheapest that we can provide housing, and then the more inexpensive it is compared to the market, the better. What is the average 3-bedroom apartment going for? How can we compete? And then the third metric would be the population. So it's great that a house is expensive, but how many people are able to have that be absorbed from the community? Because if I've got a community with 50 empty lots and the population of the town's 5,000, chances are I'm not going to be able to find 50 people that'll meet all of those criteria. And then the last thing is especially for communities that have not had homes in a long time, is the city going to try to block this transaction? Are they going to pull some? And Ferd, I bet that this is a daily call for you. What is the city going to tell me is some new law, new ordinance that is a non-conforming use that I cannot bring my mobile home in?
Good point. You're right, Stephen. I get that. I work on zoning matters on a nearly daily basis, and that's part of it. And what a lot of times, and I get it, lawyers are expensive, right? So a lot of people will hire us for as small a scope of work as they want, or they think they want, or think they need. And I had one 6 months ago. We did the title work, we did the closing docs, we did the syndication, we did the contract. And I said, you want me to do the zoning? He goes, no. I took care of the zoning with the city. We're good. They called me last week. We're not good. And they're discriminating against me because the last guy was able to bring in homes and they didn't stop him. Now they're stopping me and I can't get the electric turned on. And well, that's a problem you probably should have figured out before you bought the park, because if your business plan depends on infill, if you paid for those vacant lots, paid $30,000 a pad, you might be in a little bit of a pickle. And if you bought a deal that's stable and that those 2 or 3 pads are upside, cherry on top, it's not that big a deal. But you buy a deal that's 60% occupied and you need to fill it, that's a problem. So you're right. Coleman, what are your thoughts?
I think these guys really hit it. It's significant amount of details and study on, what will the market bear? What's our competition from, I love the housing cost, look at, what's the single family housing cost? What's the competition as far as apartments? And then, also what is the market from like a location perspective? In one side, we've talked about, hey, people want bigger houses, and, the other side of that is in certain locations where it maybe is a senior community or it's an area that's more dense, where it's a walkable neighborhood. People are willing to accept smaller houses for living closer in. And you kind of see here in Chicago, there's a lot of, metro kind of infill communities where people are selling 1448s and they're selling for cash, because to buy anything in that area is $300,000, $400,000, even for a condo. So really kind of do the homework to understand what does the market want in that location, and then also think about what is your business model. Like to your point, Bert, there's certain markets where it's really a used home market. It's not really a new home market for price point standards. There's other ways where, other markets where people really don't want to live in the 60s, 70s kind of, rehabbed home, and they really want that new product. So really trying to understand the community, how it fits into the market, what are the market demander, and then what's your kind of competition as far as housing are all huge, and kind of perpetuating a successful infill. And then also, what's your holding strategy for the asset? Like, is this something, you're trying to fill up to sell, or is this a long-term hold? And if it's a long-term hold, you want to try to put your homework in and do it right on the front end if you plan to own that asset for 20 years. I've heard a lot of people talk about setting new homes. When you set a new home, one of my favorite lines is, you want to set that home like it's going to be there for 50 years. You don't want to go back and have to fix it because you cut corners on this, that, or whatever, especially if you're going to hold the asset for a long period of time.
That's a good, that last point is the one I want to touch on. That's good about setting them right. And then if you do it by a HUD set, that's pretty much belt and suspenders. And that process, real briefly, is generally concrete below the frost line. Where I sit here, it's 36 inches deep, 2 feet wide by 2 feet wide piers with cinder blocks stacked on top, and then tied down with ground anchors, and then an XI system to prevent it from tipping, and then a vapor barrier, basically a big tarp to keep the insulation away. In my market here, to get that home and to get that set ready, it's about $3,000 to $4,000 for the concrete for single wide, and another $3,000 to $4,000 to get it installed. If I've got to transport it, there's an additional cost of probably $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000. So you could easily be in for north of 10K on a single wide, 50% to 100% more for a double wide. I'm curious in other markets, and I'm in 5 states, but primarily Missouri and Illinois, both which are HUD. I've got a Kansas park and Iowa parks, but I haven't brought many homes in those. And then some Nebraska stuff, I haven't brought many homes in either. So my pricing is in this region is kind of in that range. Other portions of the country where you guys are seeing, what is, just for our audience, what are you guys seeing on kind of a low end and a high end? Like back in Illinois, originally we were doing non-HUD sets on used homes. I could get, this is 5-6 years ago, I could get a home picked up, delivered, installed for $3,000 on the dirt. And that didn't include the utility hookups, but you could get the local guy to do that for a couple $100. It was pretty cheap. In hindsight, it was probably supposed to be on HUD sets, even though they were used, because Illinois has some onerous requirements on that. But what are you guys seeing? Is that pricing I mentioned in line, or are you guys seeing considerably higher in other portions of the country?
I'll jump in for Michigan, which is a HUD regulated, we're at about, just for the set since COVID's come in, for a single, we're around 8,000. And that's not including any lot modifications. And if you're looking at a community in Michigan, pretty much assume that unless you have piers, you're going to have to redo all of that concrete, because they mandate 6 inches of reinforced concrete for any runners and or foundations. But in Ohio and Indiana, where it's a lot more lenient, then you get, we're still at that 5,000 mark. I got an estimate for these few homes that we're bringing in Indiana, and I thought he missed out on some things, and it included skirting, steps, everything for the 5,000 mark, which since the change in 2017 in Michigan, you're not even getting close to.
Interesting.
Yeah, we just did some concrete work, and it was like $5,000 a lot just for the concrete work, and then for the installs, it was around 4,000. And so I would say it's a little bit more expensive than some of the pricing you're getting in your markets.
What state is that you're working in?
That was in Michigan.
Michigan. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Ferd, we might need to share some phone numbers, offline, because that sounds very cheap for what I've seen, and hear from different operators around the country. Depending on the size of the home is gonna depend on, the number of piers or the pad that's going in. Obviously, the more concrete, the bigger the home, the more expensive it's getting. I would say, Midwest. Then the other thing you got to talk about, like on the set, is to a Steven's point, like, does that include the stairs? The AC is definitely on top of that, another $2 to $3 grand, depending on the size of the home and how big the AC is. But I'm seeing at least like $5 to $8 grand in concrete, depending on the state and how big the home is, and then probably another $4 to $5 grand to actually set the home, and then ACs and decking. And we haven't even talked about, like, does the home have a driveway or not? On the cheap end, you see some states that you don't need concrete and you can literally do nothing, set them on ABS pads or gravel, and obviously you're saving a significant amount of money going into the ground with that concrete. So it's certainly a wide range. And then, like, I have some clients that own some communities in the West Coast too, and a home set with their kind of upgraded skirting, given the requirements, their set with skirting might be 8,000 to 10,000 just to set and skirt the home without any AC. So it's definitely going to be regional based. The more regulations, the farther south you go. The farther south you go, less regulation. Obviously, the farther that frost line goes down, the more they're regulating the set with the heave and hoe.
All right, thanks for the comments. Yeah, and to Kolman, your comment on my pricing. I do decks and skirting in house. So that's not, and then air conditioning we hire out to a pro. So those are not included.
Yep.
I'm just talking concrete for $3 to $4 grand, and then install for $3 to $4. And I would do 5 concrete at a time. So I don't do a single house. I'll just get them prepped and ready, and then I get some bulk because they get the crew there and they knock out 5. They can generally do 2 to 3 doubles in a day, and they could do 5 singles in a day. So I got a guy that'll peel off from the big companies, like, hey, squeeze me in a day, and he'll just squeeze in a day. And I'm pretty flexible, and he's pretty flexible, where because I pay, a lot of people pay net 30, some of the big guys pay net 90. We run checks every day. So I'm like, if you do the work today, I'll put it in the mail tomorrow. So that covers his payroll a little easier, where his big guy owes him 100 grand, but he's got to cover the concrete. The factory wants to get paid every day, and he's got to cover the labor every day. So that's been one way that, as a smaller operator, we've been able to get some big operator pricing on some stuff, is pay exceptionally fast. And then it helps that I'm younger, so to speak, than the big fish. He's like, look, I don't know how many parks you're going to own in 10 years. You might be the big fish in 10 years. So why would I turn on your business now? And his son is my age. He's like, look, my son's here. You can work with my son 20 years from now. So we've had guys that we've sent around traveling. I bought a park from a guy that had a concrete business that did it for the retailers, and he was even cheaper, but he was real difficult guy to work with. So we actually never hired him. But he's out of Illinois, and he was like $75 a pier. You generally got about 21 piers on a 1680. So he was pretty reasonable. And legit skilled guy. He was worth $10 million. I mean, that's his concrete business was super successful. All right, guys. Next question: how do you select the manufacturers you work with? Obviously there's a geographic component that you're not going to be buying homes from completely all over the country, and then there's a market-based component based on the quality and the pricing point. But there's a lot of options out there, a lot of good options. I've probably bought from 10 manufacturers, but there's 10 more I just haven't got around to give it a try, and I may never. So I'm curious who you guys like, if you're willing to share that, and or what goes into the decision hopper there. Andrew, you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, I'll jump in and go first. I mean, I think it's heavily based on location, because transportation costs can get really expensive really fast. So that weighs heavily into our decision. We've done a lot of homes through Legacy because they have, I think they get some homes out of the Anderson plant, Anderson Homes, and we've also gotten some direct from Anderson. So that's kind of where we are. We like Legacy because they offer the financing in-house, and then we've gotten some good quality from them after we paid for some of the upgrades. We didn't just buy like the bottom tier, as it comes out of the factory. We make sure to get some upgrades, and that's what we've gone with.
Great. Steven,
Yeah.
you mentioned Champion is you buy a lot. Is that your primary source?
My primary source of homes is Champion Topeka. And they have, I believe they do the most volume of anything, any floors per day. I know that they're over 30 a day. And they do offer a variety of VOG, drywall, and different price point options. And the service department of the manufacturer is extremely important. Like with Legacy, for example, we've ordered some Legacy homes for Ohio, and they really stretched themselves, and the product was absolutely perfect for the market, but to get it serviced out there, I mean, they're just so far away. So availability for service, and then just ability to, provide homes is the biggest, factor, in today's world.
Good points. Coleman, any thoughts?
I think these guys nailed it. Geographic proximity to keep transport costs down is certainly a huge factor. And then these days, if you want new homes, just the availability to actually get them becomes the second factor. And ultimately trying to find what, from a price point perspective is going to work for your market. Those are the three biggest factors in selecting a manufacturer.
Good points. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was at first was testing my market. I didn't know if it could, what brands it could handle. So I bought from Topeka Champion plant. I bought from Benton Topeka, the Benton Champion plant. They have a Commonwealth, and they have what was the other brand I bought from them? A couple of darn blank. They got the Redmond Advantage. They have a nice porch model. That's Redmond / Champion. That's a higher price home. So I've really got it's like I'm a loss leader for me. I put it on corner lots that look good, but I generally sell it at a loss. As a replacement to that, I've gone with some Adventure homes. Adventure's kind of spin off, kind of smaller brand, but I think they got some nice houses. They're a little more expensive than they're at the base level Champion or Clayton product. I really liked the Clayton Independent out of Waco. I bought a lot of that house. They jacked the transport up, so I ended up switching more and going to True plants out of Hackleburg in Lynn, Alabama, and I can get the satisfaction, the Marvel, and the Victory Plus out of there, the singles and the doubles. And a lot of people knock the True homes. I sold a lot of True homes in 2019. I probably sold 30 True homes in one park, and they were higher quality than some of the Champion, some of the Clayton. I was surprised. The floor plan was different, so I was a big fan of them. Those have been the ones I've mostly gone with. I've bought some Claytons out of Wakarusa, Indiana. They got a nice model. It's up north, so they're kind of higher quality. It's more of the sheetrock and backsplash and stuff like that. But in the mid-Missouri area, it's been harder to sell them at the right price point. There's a couple other plants that I've tried that haven't liked as much. But I probably won't bash them too bad right here. But all the ones I've bought from the ones I've mentioned and been pretty pleased. I like to get the ones with some light sconces and window elevations and embellishments on the front end if it's on a corner lot. If it's not on a corner lot, I pretty much just go with the True home down the middle, pretty inexpensive, and go with space over high quality. Sunshine homes are stupid expensive. They're 2x6, so they're high quality. I had to pay 2.5 times the normal amount of concrete for a Sunshine home, because in addition to piers underneath the I-beams, you have to do an additional set of piers around the perimeter because the home weighs so much. It was like 5 times, like ruined my yard. It was like 5 times heavier than the rest of them. And I had to put 48 piers on a single wide home,
Wow.
including a couple of big ones that are like 5,000-pound piers. So I will publicly say that'll be the last sunshine home I ever pay for concrete on. So live and learn. I didn't know that, didn't think about it that much. Next question for you guys. Do you sell or do you rent or terms or all the combination? And is there a preference? And there's some guys, I talked to a guy this morning, he's like, we are park owned home model all the way. Most people are not park owned home all model. They prefer to be tenant owned home, but it's generally a lot easier to rent a home than sell a home. So occupancy is what occupancy is, with some caveats that I'm sure we'll touch on. But what do you guys prefer, and what decision points go into whether you're going to sell or rent a home? Kolman, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. It's a million factors that go into that decision. And, to start, I think, it depends on what the market craves. Some markets you see want more heavily rentals. From a pure execution standpoint, if you're a small operator, it's much easier to just rent a home because you own it and you can move someone in. To actually sell a home in most states, you start to get more issues with like dealer licensing. Do you need one? Don't you need one? If I only do a few homes, I fall under the limit. As far as like documentation standpoint, it's harder to sell a home. But I think a lot of people would agree, when you sell homes, you typically have a little bit more sticky resident than if you straight rent them. That being said, from a rental standpoint, I know a lot of people in the industry that like renting new homes because they're mostly in good order. They get some depreciation benefits to them. It's easy, and they don't really have a lot of problems with their new homes in terms of, people tearing them up if they do an okay job. So I think the answer comes down to the market and then how seasoned is the operator. If this is your first park or your second park and you're really trying to get your arms around it, renting is good in that it's easy, you have control. In some states, you have more control over what the tenant can do if you have a problem tenant, if you own the home, to, evictions, et cetera, et cetera. But if you really, want to go towards the land lease model, that's great as well. But there's a lot of factors that go into that in terms of dealers licensing, compliance, paperwork. And then also, one thing we really haven't covered on this talk at some point is how are you capitalizing all these homes? Are you buying them all for cash? Are you doing it through 21st? Are you using a bank credit facility? Did you raise the extra money from your investor? Because that's a huge piece that we kind of see is buying new homes gets really capital intensive. How do you do that to scale? So that's just some comments that pop into the brain in no particular order.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Coleman hit a lot of it just right on the head. And something else is, the ability to, if you're selling these houses, what ability do you offer for your residents to get financing? If you want to sell, and this is just, we're talking more than just ones and twos, are you offering recourse financing? Because if not, then it's, for a lot of our residents, they're not going to be able to get traditional chattel financing on their own. So it comes to a point, if I have to fill 20 lots, am I actually going to be able to get that financing? And then if I'm going to have to sign recourse as an owner or operator, would it be, is it such a bad thing to rent that home instead? Because then I have greater control over my asset. I can do monthly inspections. I can, if I go in and see a bunch of holes in my wall, I can charge them now. Whereas if I'm signing recourse and something happens to that home, I lose a lot of control. And then the last thing that is, it's the speed in which we are trying to infill. The faster you want to infill these communities, the more rentals you're going to have to implement. And then also is the return on the home portion of the rent. So, you sell the home, that's a one-time hit. Hopefully it's a profit center for you, but in today's market, it often couldn't be, break even at best. Whereas that home rent will give you, in some cases, that positive little boost that could make or break a deal potentially. So we're mainly fans of a hybrid model.
Yeah, I think these guys, hit it on the head there. I think like you mentioned earlier, it depends. We've done a little bit of each, but it depends, and we've done some of each, but we would prefer, a fully tenant-owned home community. But it's just, what path do we have to take to get there?
Agreed. I think you guys hit all of it. Well, the one thing maybe extra I'll add, and this was kind of a pain point for me. I had earlier on in my deal cycle, I had envisioned one day refinancing with agency debt and getting off the land loan recourse. And I was told that my percentage of rental homes did not include homes sold on terms. And I was told my rental homes percentage was higher than it really was. I got time to refinance, and I owned too many houses. Either I owned them as rentals or I owned them as sold on terms. And that was going to, by rule, preclude me from going from off a local bank loan to an agency loan. So I had to quickly convert and pound on doors to, hey, you want to buy your house? Here's what we need. We'll give you a rent credit. Here's $2,000 for your down payment out of your rentals. Here's the application for 21st or PEP or whomever. Fill this bad boy out and get this thing bought. We'll even knock off $1,000 right now. And it ended up working out fine that we got the homes moved. But that's my bigger concern. If of the hybrid model, I agree. It's probably the best strategy, because it's not as realistic to go to the ideal strategy of tenant-owned homes only, because it's slow to get the infill. But we got to be ever vigilant as to what's the global business plan, and if it involves refinance with agency debt, or perhaps even sell to the next guy who's going to use agency debt, that percentage of park-owned homes needs to be generally below 35%. I know UMH was recently able to get a exception to that, 100% park-owned home financing, but I'm not UMH and neither are you. So we got to play by the rest of us got to play by a different set of rules, which we call the rules. So that's just another thing. But I think, Kolman, you made good points on the retail license stuff, and then cash for financing buying. I'm curious on, are you guys using cash to buy homes, or are you using a line of credit? Andrew mentioned financing through legacy. And then I think we've touched on the exit strategy of the homes, that the hybrid is kind of often the way that the world goes. But I personally have bought homes mostly with lines of credit from local banks. And then sometimes local bank will give us unfavorable line of credit. So like I have a park now, I just got 10 free houses from the school district, 4 walls, nothing in the middle, but they're free if we take them off the school district. So we moved them off site. We're putting in the rooms, we're putting in the kitchens, we're putting in the plumbing. So I'm going to have a lot of renovation costs, but I got no basis in the home, but I didn't pay for the home. So I can't get any debt on it. So I'm having to front cash $500,000 in cash on park-owned homes. That's no picnic, right? But there's not debt on that. And you can't get, so that's become a problem, so to speak. As GP, we just put up the cash as we're a line of credit. But there's like all things, there's a finite amount of resource. So getting lines of credit through 21st is a cash program. Legacy has a program. Is there anything else you guys are using besides the 21st or Legacy? Or are you guys using those, or using lines of credit, or as Kolman mentioned, are you raising the equity at the forefront as part of the transaction?
Jump in there. It's kind of a hybrid model for the new homes, mainly Legacy's financing program, but then on the used homes, we're raising the equity up front primarily for those.
Okay.
The only other program that we're really utilizing is Triad. They've got a really good line, and I know with 21st and Triad, they've both made it so easy that they've got your inventory line, and then if you sell the house, they'll be able to put it on a separate line, and then if you lease the house, they'll be able to put it on another line. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility on which route to go.
Yeah, my knock on Triad has been it's harder to get somebody approved to buy.
Yep.
You can get off the recourse or the repurchase obligation, which is ideal, but it depends on the market. They have pretty high standards for credit score, and I had somebody, she had a great credit score. This was awkward. I got my marketing. Here's the payments, 20 years, but this is only the payment. This is pending bank approval. Here's the loan app. She did 21st. Their interest rates were high. She was, just crazy. I'm not paying 9% interest. I got a 750 credit score. I said, try it. You got that good a credit score, they'll probably approve you. They did. They said, you're too old for a 20-year loan. We think you're going to die in 12 years, so we'll give you a 12-year loan. So, which then made her payment higher. So the payments that I market, even though I said subject to bank approval, asterisk, I'm not the bank has to approve you. I couldn't deliver the payments for because the interest rate was too high on 21st, and Triad did a 12-year instead of a 20-year loan because she was in her 60s. So I was surprised that they could even do that. I was like, why are you guys doing 12? They're like, because she's going to die. This is like, she's not that old, but it was a surprise. Coleman, any others you see out there?
Yeah, Triad is definitely the other large one, and they do have other programs that they're trying to roll out. I know they're rolling out some, I think what they refer to as their bronze program, so lower credit scores. And then on a few of my small deals, I use bank line, and we kind of buy the homes and then either rent them or use Triad. Triad does have a COP program where you can define the credit box that you're willing to fill, and they'll write and service the paper. Or I know a lot of people are using rent credit programs or lease owns, but predominantly borrowing from banks with a personal guarantee on homes.
Yeah, and there's several others, Credit Human and Cascade and Vanderbilt. I've done less with those guys, and we've done sometimes what Andrew does. If they're used homes, or if we have a decent feel for the infill schedule, we may just raise it as part of the equity raise. This recent deal where I got 10 free homes, I wasn't planning on buying 10 homes at once and spending 20 cash on each of them. So that wasn't in the plan, but I'm like, free home falls in your lap. All double.
Well, I think that's a big point, right? Like thinking people should think about that on the front end if they have an infill execution strategy, is that even with like bank lines of credit to buy new homes, they don't advance all the dollars, right? They might advance 80% of the invoice or 100% of the invoice, and then you still got to have cash on hand to actually set the homes or transport them. So if you got an infill program, think about that on the front end, so really how much capital you need to raise and to execute on whatever your strategy is.
Absolutely, and that is the decision of sell versus rent goes into that decision matrix. I mean, like this park here, I've got about 15 homes that I just brought in, and some of them are complete renovations. Some of them we bought them for 20,000 and we got a loan for 15, but then I got to spend more for the set. If I rent them, sure, I get 750 a month, but it's going to take 4 years before I recycle that capital. So that's part of the last deal I did. I had a 500,000 line of credit. I bought $3 million of homes on it in about a year and a half, but it was the same 500,000 because I was selling more than I was renting. But in a market where rentals make sense, you do have that problem of like, you're adding value to the land asset, but from a cash flow perspective, you're pouring and bleeding cash to then get coupon clipping later in life. And depending on balloons and interest rate and amortization and loan thresholds, it does influence the rest of the global business plan. All right, guys, this is a ton of information that we're sharing. I really appreciate it. Anybody have any closing comments or thoughts or tips? And if not, at least tell us where people can find you after this call.
Yeah, so you can find us at blankfamilycommunities.com. And the closing thoughts with infills are that they're by far the most complex part of our business, and you really do get a hang of it once you start going at them. But don't underestimate the auxiliary costs of bringing in a house. A lot of people underwrite, and then the time that don't underestimate the time that it takes to actually get that home occupied. I see people underwrite deals where they say, we're going to get 6 houses delivered in June, and then they put income on those houses in June. I don't know anybody that will get delivered and occupy a home in 1 month.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can find me at keelteam.com, just KEEL team.com. My last piece would be on small lots. I think there's a lot of parks out there right now that are up for sale and have, what looks like considerable amount of upside through vacant lots, but they would only fit homes that were, 12-foot wide, older homes. So highly recommend you do the due diligence up front to know what size of a home is going to fit on those lots. And like Ferd mentioned earlier, make sure that the zoning will allow you to bring in new homes, because there's many zoning committees that are mandating a minimum year requirement, or you can only bring in homes that are 10 years old or newer. And if you have small lots, you're likely going to have a really hard time filling those. So
Yeah, awesome being here with you guys. Kolman, Kolman at sunstonerea.com. And appreciate the opportunity. I think you guys kind of killed it. And, if this is your first deal, I don't know that you should jump into the deep end of heavy infill unless you really, just love to immerse yourselves in all the pains. Because it's a struggle, but great being here with you guys. And thanks for organizing for us all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for having
ending
us.
us
Yeah,
on a
thanks,
high note of no, that's a great point. That this is the infill is not for the faint of heart, but it's where the value's added, and where the value's added is where the money will follow. So really appreciate your guys' wisdom and expertise on this. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Ferd.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.